Out of the 10 dates arranged by the Sullivans, I only ever saw Robert Sullivan and Maisie Corbouz, but never Xavier Sullivan himself. He always had countless excuses over the phone. He was in a meeting at work, drinking at a bar, or in bed with a woman. I thought that our agreed marriage would automatically fall through due to his lack of cooperation. But Xavier's parents, Robert and Maisie, looked at me with determination and said, "Once he sees you, he will agree to marry you." When Xavier finally met me, he seemed completely entranced and agreed to the marriage right away. I thought he had fallen in love with me at first sight. But later, I discovered that I was merely a stand-in for his first love, Elsa Zermino. The first time I saw Elsa was in a photo I found hidden inside one of Xavier's books. She looked very much like me, except for her eyes. I had round doe eyes that looked innocent and unassuming, whereas Elsa had upturned eyes that were seductive and alluring. So I confronted Xavier with the photo. He snatched it away and pushed me to the ground mercilessly. With a frosty expression he sneered, "Don't touch that photo. You're not worthy." The second time I heard Elsa's name was in bed. Xavier was drunk and suddenly became uncharacteristically tender. As he kissed me, it was as if he was handling a fragile piece of art. His gentle touch stirred my emotions. But as he leaned close to my ear, he whispered softly, "Elsa." I froze in an instant when I heard that name. The next day, I went to Xavier's parents and asked, "Who is Elsa? Is she the woman who looks like me?" Their expressions faltered immediately. Maisie spat. "She's the temptress who almost cost Xavier his life." Robert tried to reassure me. "Don't worry, we've already sent her out of the country." They kindly informed me that Elsa liked to wear jasmine-scented perfume, because that was Xavier's favorite scent. Xavier had a ghastly scar that was about 8 inches on his leg, but every time I asked about it, he refused to tell me how he got it. When I got home, I sprayed on the jasmine perfume I had just bought and coaxed Xavier into drinking with me. Usually, he ignored me when he came home, but this time, he surprisingly agreed. I got Xavier drunk and asked him about the scar. With red eyes, he confided, "Elsa and I were traveling in the snowy mountains when the paths got blocked. She suddenly came down with a fever and passed out. I carried her on my back and hiked down the mountain, but I fell into a cave, and my leg got cut by a piece of scrap metal. I'm a man, so having a scar on my body isn't a big deal. But the doctor said that if we had been an hour later, her life might have been in danger." Elsa being in a life-threatening condition was merely a possibility at that time. Yet, the fear it brought him lingered for a long time after that incident. I used to think Xavier was born emotionally distant. I assumed that even with someone he loved, he would be cold and distant most of the time. It would be on very rare occasions that his tenderness would shine through. Little did I know that he had given all his burning love to Elsa, and what was left for me was just cold indifference. The next day, I woke up before dawn and noticed the screen of Xavier's phone glowing. He was turned away from me, chatting with someone saved in his contacts as L. "Xavier, I'm coming back. I had only left 5 years ago, because your parents told me you had decided to marry Helena Joffrin." For the next few days, there was always a hint of joy in Xavier's eyes. But the moment he saw me, his expression would turn frigid. My dad, Brock Joffrin, lived next door. He often came over to check on things. So, he quickly noticed that something was wrong. He hurriedly came over and asked, "Did you and Xavier have a fight?" I stayed silent, not wanting to respond. My dad anxiously tried to persuade me. "If he's upset, just appease him. What good can come from angering the Sullivan family?" I was so angry that my eyes reddened as I snapped back. "Does our entire family have to bend over backward to please him?" 5 years ago, my dad's investment failed, so he ended up owing the Sullivan family millions of dollars. He cried and begged me to sign the marriage agreement to save him. After Xavier and I got married, my dad often said to me, "Now that you're married, take good care of Xavier. Do you know how many people dream of being a part of the Sullivan family? You've gotten lucky, so don't act like you're living a miserable life." I knew my dad loved money more than me. He was close to the Zermino family, so he must have known about Xavier and Elsa. Yet he still pushed his own daughter, me, into a loveless marriage. The thought made me nauseous, and I threw up everything I had just eaten. Upon seeing my pale face, my dad suddenly asked with a gleeful smile. Are you pregnant? Pregnant? As if. Xavier took great precautions to ensure there was no chance of having a child with me. He made it clear that he didn't want me to have his baby. My dad seemed to see right through me. He suddenly rushed into the bedroom and returned with a whole box of condoms. With a smug grin he boasted, "See, I poked holes in all of these a long time ago. If you're pregnant with Xavier's child, you'll be set for life." He called my mom excitedly, laughing as he told her to hurry up and buy a pregnancy test kit. I trembled furiously with rage. Instantly, I grabbed his phone and smashed it to the ground. My dad's face darkened. He slapped me hard, knocking me to the floor. I instinctively put my hand down to brace myself, but my palm pressed into the broken glass from the phone. A sharp pain shot through my body. However, my heart hurt even more. It felt as if a knife had been plunged into my chest. I held back my tears and looked down. The floor was stained red with my blood. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. In the next moment, Xavier walked over and towered above me as he looked down condescendingly. A shrewd glint flashed in my dad's eyes as he said, "Helena is hurt. You should take her to the hospital for a checkup." Xavier glanced coldly at the blood on the floor and frowned. He said with displeasure, "This is a brand new rug, and you've ruined it." I had signed for that rug myself, and the sender was Elsa. Already furious in the first place, I couldn't hold back my emotions anymore. I retorted, "This is my house too. I'll do whatever I want." With that, I grabbed an antique teapot worth $300,000 from the display shelf and smashed it to the ground. My dad rushed to stop me, but I smashed another 15th century porcelain vase that was worth more than $1 million. Xavier watched me impassively, as if I were breaking glass instead of priceless antiques. As I reached up again, my hand brushed against a small object. It had been carefully tucked away, so I had never noticed it before. Xavier was taller than me, hence, he saw what I'd grabbed before I could even take a look at it. "Don't touch that," he said sharply. I thought it was some kind of rare antique, but when I took a closer look, it was just a scrunchie. It was yellowing around the edges, showing its age. The more I looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. It looked like the one I used to wear all the time as a kid but had lost. Xavier grabbed it from me in one swift motion. He said harshly, "This belongs to her. You're not allowed to dirty it with your hands. That looks like a scrunchie I once had." The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them, and Xavier looked at me as if I had lost my mind. I grew more and more confused, and couldn't help but try to grab it back from him to take a closer look. Xavier's expression became glacial, and he shoved me to the ground with one hand. My already injured hand hit the shattered glass again. The pain was so intense that my vision blurred. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed. Upon seeing that I was awake, Maisie held my hand and said, "Don't worry, the baby is safe." Robert exclaimed in exasperation, "How can you not tell us about such an important matter?" I was stunned. After a long silence, I finally asked the question that had been troubling me. "What's the story behind that scrunchie that Xavier keeps holding on to?" Robert and Maisie knew I wouldn't rest until I got an answer from them, so they had no choice but to explain the backstory of that scrunchie. When Xavier was a child, he was kidnapped. A little girl wearing that scrunchie saved him. He didn't cry when he came home. On the contrary, he smiled, saying that he'd met an angel. Familiar memories began to resurface in my mind. Back then, I had gone to play in an abandoned neighborhood nearby. Xavier had been locked behind a chain fence like a dirty stray dog. To rescue him, I told the police to use me as bait. After he was saved, my mom beckoned for me to go home for dinner. So, I left before he even had a chance to thank me. I never imagined Xavier would have such a tender side. But Robert and Maisie were furious. They pounded the table in frustration and complained. Because of that incident, no matter how much trouble Elsa caused, Xavier always spoiled her unconditionally. "Elsa." I looked up in shock, my memories now in complete disarray. Robert went on. "Xavier asked us to offer a huge reward to find the girl who saved him after he came back. The very next day, Elsa showed up at our door. It's terrible that Xavier's savior turned out to be her," Maisie lamented. "So that was what happened." It turned out that Elsa was the imposter, who had stolen the affection that should have been mine. Xavier's parents made hundreds of calls to inform him that I was pregnant. Finally, he showed up, but he brought Elsa with him. He turned back and carefully adjusted her scarf, tenderly reminding her to keep herself warm and not catch a cold. Then, he strode over to me with an icy expression and slapped me so hard that I fell off the bed. He angrily accused me. "Whose bastard child are you carrying? How dare you cheat on me?" Xavier's parents, who had been about to help me up, suddenly hesitated and looked at me with doubtful eyes. Just then, my dad walked in carrying a kettle. Without hesitation, he pointed his finger at Xavier and shouted, "The baby is yours! I poked holes in all of your condoms." Rage filled Xavier's eyes, and he punched my dad hard. I saw blood gush from his nose. My dad begged for mercy, but all he received in return were more punches and kicks. Xavier's parents didn't intervene. They merely said indifferently, "Be careful not to hit Helena. She's carrying your child." In Robert and Maisie's eyes, we were nothing more than lowly peasants they could beat as they pleased. When Xavier heard what my dad said, his anger flared even more. He picked up the kettle, lifted my dad's shirt, and poured boiling water onto his back ruthlessly. I grabbed Xavier's leg, begging him not to be so cruel. However, Elsa kicked me toward the door. My dad screamed in pain. He took one look at his own back and fainted out of sheer terror. Xavier left behind a check for $10 million and walked out with Elsa. After he left, Robert and Maisie reminded me that the marriage agreement that I signed was about to expire. They pressured me to sign the agreement renewal. Otherwise, they threatened not to treat my dad and let him fend for himself. The divorce agreement Xavier sent me sat quietly on the table in the hospital room. The Sullivans chose to ignore it and pretended that they didn't see it. As I touched my growing belly, I wondered how Xavier would treat this child if I agreed to renew the contract. I steeled myself and calmly said, "I got pregnant with this child because of my dad. He should bear some responsibility." The moment Robert and Maisie realized that I wasn't going to renew the agreement, their expressions soured. They threatened me harshly. "You won't sign it? Then you can't stay in this high-end hospital room." I was kicked out of the private hospital. When I tried to return home, the security guards blocked me at the door. I sat alone on a bench in the neighborhood until late into the night before I was finally able to contact an old friend, Vincent Laster, who was now a doctor. He arranged a private hospital room for me and made sure I had carefully prepared meals 3 times a day. A few days before I was due to give birth, Vincent suddenly confessed to me, "Helena, I've liked you for a long time. Please give me a chance to take care of you and the baby." I was moved and nodded in agreement. I decided that after the baby was born we would get together. The day before the birth, I was in so much pain that I was drenched in cold sweat from head to toe. My heart was racing, and the fear and anxiety only grew with time. Vincent held my hand and softly reassured me that everything would be okay. My heart rate finally started to calm down a little. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded from a corner. "She's carrying my child. What do you think you're doing?" I looked up to see Xavier, along with Elsa and his parents, gathered around my hospital bed. They stared at my belly, their eyes full of calculated intent. Panic surged through me as I looked at Xavier. "How did you know I was here? How did you know I was having a C-section today?" Xavier's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Because I bought Vincent off from the beginning. He confessed to you just to keep you calm so you deliver the baby without any problems." With a face that was devoid of any warmth and expression, Xavier patted my stiffened face. "Idiot, did you really think any man could actually love you?" As tears welled up in my eyes, Elsa suddenly smiled at me and said, "Don't worry, Helena. Once the baby is born, I'll take good care of it for you." She had already taken my place in Xavier's life. Now she wanted to take my child too. Elsa's eyes glinted with malice as if she was cursing my child. Her eyes seemed to be saying, "For the rest of your life, you'll suffer more than your mother ever did." I felt myself sinking deeper into despair, as if I were falling into the depths of hell. Robert and Maisie were still trying to persuade me. "Sign the renewal agreement, then only we can protect you." I laughed bitterly and questioned, "You want me to fight Xavier for custody of the baby to keep Elsa away, don't you?" They suddenly fell silent. Then they gave some lame excuse and left, saying that they would come back the next day. In the hospital room, Vincent was administering a sedative to me. The bitter smile remained on my face. Vincent was silent for a long time. Nevertheless, he finally broke down and confessed. He offered me $10 million. I could never make that kind of money in my entire life. I didn't have the energy to argue with him. My mind was racing as I pondered what would come next. If the Sullivan family took my baby from me, my child would only suffer more than I did. I looked at Vincent with clear, determined eyes and said, "I'll give you $20 million, but you have to do one thing." "What is it?" "Kill me." The next day, the Sullivan family arrived at the hospital eagerly to welcome the newborn. To their utter dismay, the only thing they saw was my corpse. Vincent regretfully informed them, "She took 2 whole bottles of sleeping pills last night. We couldn't save her." Xavier glanced at me briefly and scoffed, feeling disgruntled. He then left with his parents with a gloomy expression. Only my mom, Esther Todd, stayed back with me. She wept mournfully by my bedside, keeping vigil over my body. I opened my eyes and gently patted her head to comfort her. I whispered, "I'm still alive. Don't cry." My mom's face blanched due to the extreme shock. With a smile, I explained everything to her. Vincent had injected me with a special drug that caused a state of apparent death. I slept for a full day and night. Then I woke up perfectly normal again. After giving birth to my daughter, I left with her and settled down in Clearwater, a nearby city. Xavier had once said he would never set foot in this city again after breaking up with Elsa. From my time with Xavier, I had picked up quite a few business skills. I invested in several companies, and the money I earned was more than enough to support myself and my daughter. I named my daughter Athena. She looked about 60% like me and 40% like Xavier. However, her personality was nothing like his. She was always affectionate and loved cuddling with me when she slept. My mom was afraid the Sullivan family would find us. So, when she video called me, she always did it behind my dad's back. For 3 years, I learned about everything happening with the Sullivan family through my mom. My dad cried outside the Sullivan residence for 3 days and nights. In the end, Xavier transferred the neighboring villa to his name. My dad never once visited the fake grave my mom had arranged for me. Xavier wanted to marry Elsa, but his parents never approved of it. 2.5 years later, Robert died from a heart attack. Xavier seized the opportunity and had a public fallout with Maisie. In a fit of rage, Maisie gave Elsa 2 tight slaps in front of everyone. After that, Xavier cut ties with his family completely. A few days later, Maisie suddenly jumped to her death. My mom lowered her voice and said, "The day Mrs. Sullivan killed herself, I saw Elsa at the Sullivan residence. It didn't sit right with me, so I recorded a video. I immediately asked her to send it to me. In the video, Elsa tried to appear calm as she left. However, her legs were trembling the whole time. Something was definitely off. Goosebumps broke out across my arms. At the same time, I suddenly got a series of messages from Elsa on my old phone number. Xavier is about to marry me. The wedding will be held at the city's most luxurious 5-star hotel. When he married you, he didn't even bother with a simple ceremony, did he? Enjoy watching from heaven as I have the grand wedding you never got." I never expected Elsa to be so obsessed with me, the ex-wife who had supposedly been dead for years. Another message popped up on my phone. It read, "Don't be sad, at least your dead child will keep you company." I got lucky. Otherwise, it would have died at my hands. At that moment, I reached the limit of all the patience I had left. I recalled how Elsa had cursed my child before she was even born. Even now, her cruelty knew no bounds. I could barely breathe from the rage. I was very close to crushing my phone as I gripped it with all my might. Without hesitation, I started packing my bags. Cursing me was one thing, but cursing my child? Elsa had messed with the wrong woman. It was clear that she had a death wish. She wanted a grand wedding. I would make sure she had a grand funeral instead.